The hospital director smiled for donors, while 6 missing girls scratched a countdown into a steel door beneath his feet. A maid heard them with 11 minutes remaining. She forced the door open, but armed guards immediately accused her of planting the children there to blackmail the hospital. The Mafia boss ordered everyone frozen until he saw what the youngest girl was holding, a burned voice recorder recovered from the maid's apartment. Then it played the final message her little sister had sent before disappearing 12 years earlier. Mara, if you hear this, count the bells. 4 short. 2 long. They moved us below Saint Daria. The man with the silver crane said charity girls leave no families behind. The recording dissolved into static, but Mara Bennett heard what everyone else missed, a slow, mechanical hiss behind her sister's frightened voice, identical to the sound now leaking through 6 vents above the girls. The red countdown on the wall dropped from 11 minutes to 10. Dr. Adrian Valle. Saint Daria Charity Hospital's celebrated director stopped smiling. That device was found in her cleaning cart. He told the donors crowded behind the basement barrier. She brought these children here. Mara stared at him through the smoke, still curling from the recorder's cracked casing. She was 28, broad-shouldered and plus-size. A night maid whom wealthy visitors rarely noticed unless a floor was wet or a wastebasket remained full. Tonight, for the first time, every camera in the hospital was pointed at her. It was stolen from my apartment this morning. She said, head of security. Grant Hollow raised his pistol. Convenient. The youngest girl flinched and pressed herself against Mara's hip. Her hospital gown was too large. Her bare feet were grey with dust, and a purple number had been stamped behind her left ear. 5 other girls huddled in the room. The eldest, no more than 16. None appeared on Saint Daria's patient list. None had a bed, medicine, or food. They had 1 bucket of water, 6 thin blankets, and a steel wall scored with hundreds of short lines. The newest marks formed the number 10, the vents. Mara said, they're not bringing air in. They're pulling it out. Vale stepped forward. She is creating panic. Remove her. Nobody moves. Luca Moretti said. He had been standing among the donors in a black suit, silent enough to be mistaken for another wealthy patron, until 20 armed men in the corridor obeyed his 3 words instead of Hollow's weapon. Luca had come to announce a $20 million expansion grant from the Moretti Foundation. Every person in the room knew the other half of his reputation. He controlled the most disciplined mafia organization on the eastern seaboard. And men who lied to him often discovered that silence could become a permanent condition. Yet he did not look at Vale. He looked at Mara. Why do you recognize the sound? Industrial sterilization. She answered, I clean the surgical isolation rooms. When the purge begins, the system draws out oxygen, seals the vents, and floods the space with vaporized peroxide. It kills bacteria, because nothing living is supposed to be inside. The oldest girl, Amaya, lifted her chin. They told us the room would be cleaned after the party. The timer changed to 9. Vale spread his hands toward Luca. This basement was decommissioned years ago. The woman has clearly studied our systems. Mara crossed to the supply pipe and placed her palm against it. The metal was growing warm. The purge is already heating. Luca nodded once to his security captain. Rafael Cruz. Cut the power. Rafael spoke into his radio. A reply came within seconds. The basement circuit is isolated. Main breakers will not interrupt it. Hollow's face showed relief for less than a heartbeat. Mara caught it. So did Luca. "Where is the manual valve?" Luca asked. "Behind the north service wall," Vale said too quickly. Mara shook her head. "No. That wall backs against the foundation. The valve has to be near the laundry return, because maintenance cannot cross a sterile zone during a purge." She pointed to a narrow vent behind the girls. "There's a crawl space beyond that grill. Too small for my men," Raphael said. Mara dropped to her knees and pulled a flat screwdriver from her apron. Then stopped talking. She removed the screws, while Luca ordered Raphael to find the chemical tanks and Hollow to place his weapon on the floor. Hollow refused. One of Luca's men disarmed him without firing. Vale protested that they were endangering patients upstairs. But Luca held up the scorched recorder. "If one child dies while your voice fills this room, every donor upstairs will remember which man asked us to wait." Mara forced the grill aside. The crawl space was barely wider than her shoulders. She looked at the 6 girls. "When the air changes, cover your mouths with the blankets and stay low." The youngest caught her sleeve. "They said you would come." "Miss Bennett." Mara felt the basement tilt beneath her. "Who said that the lady with the blue shoes?" The timer showed 7 minutes. Mara pushed herself into the shaft. Metal scraped her arms and dust clogged her throat. Behind her, Luca ordered his men to record every wall. Bracelet, eloque, and face before anyone could alter the scene. Ahead, the mechanical hiss thickened. She crawled toward it, until the passage divided. One branch carried hot air. The other carried a faint sweetness, like scorched oranges. Her sister Lily had described that smell in the first missing person interview 12 years ago, but the detective had called it a child's imagination. Mara chose the sweet air. At the end of the shaft, she found a red wheel secured by a fresh steel chain. A silver crane had been engraved on the padlock. The symbol from Lily's message was not a bird. It was a corporate logo. "I found the valve," she shouted. "It's chained." Raphael passed bolt cutters through the shaft. Mara braced her back against the metal, locked both hands around the handles, and pulled. The first bite barely dented the chain. The timer reached 5. She pulled again until the handles bruised her ribs. A link snapped. She spun the wheel, but it stopped after a quarter turn. Someone had driven a locking pin through the stem. Peroxide mist whispered into the girls' room. They began coughing. "There's a pin," Mara shouted. Luca removed his suit jacket, crouched at the opening, and asked exactly what she saw. She described the assembly. He told Raphael to bring a steel punch, but the tools were upstairs. 3 minutes remained. "The cart," Mara said. "My cleaning cart has a chisel under the mop press." Hollow lunged for the basement door. Luca's men caught him before he reached it. Mara heard a struggle, and Vale shouting that the entire wing would explode if they interfered. Luca ignored both men. A narrow chisel slid through the shaft. Mara jammed it beneath the pin and struck it with the bolt cutter. Once, twice. The third blow split her palm. The fourth drove the pin upward. The timer fell to 1 minute. She spun the valve until the hiss became a dying whistle. Red numbers flashed 0. For 1 suspended second, nothing changed. Then the warm pipes cooled. Fresh air rushed through the vents, and 6 girls began to cry. Mara crawled backward with blood on her hand and dust across her face. When she emerged, Luca took her injured palm without asking and wrapped it in the white handkerchief from his pocket. "You knew the right tunnel," he said quietly. "My sister left me the direction." Above them, applause from the charity gala continued through the ceiling. Vale looked up at the sound and seemed to recover his public face. "A terrible misunderstanding has been prevented," he announced toward the donor cameras. "Now these children need medical evaluation, and Miss Bennett needs to answer questions. They will be evaluated by doctors who do not work for you," Luca said. The basement elevator opened before Vale could respond. Police Chief Owen Mercer entered with 8 officers and a warrant already bearing Mara's name. The warrant accused her of kidnapping 6 minors, falsifying hospital credentials, and attempting to extort Saint Daria. It had been signed 43 minutes before she opened the steel door. Mercer ordered her handcuffed. Luca read the timestamp and handed the paper back. "You prepared an arrest before the crime was discovered." Mercer's jaw tightened. "We received an anonymous warning." "From whom?" "Protected source." Amaya stepped between Mara and the officers. "She saved us." Mercer did not meet her eyes. "The children are confused." The youngest girl clung harder to Mara. Luca did not threaten the chief. Instead, he faced the donors filming from the corridor. "Chief Mercer, are you arresting?" The woman who stopped an active sterilization cycle while leaving, the director who controlled the building free. Mercer saw the phones and changed tactics. He ordered everyone detained as witnesses, including Vale. Hollow and Luca. Vale agreed immediately. Luca almost smiled. "Good. Then preserve the basement exactly as it is." The chief signaled 2 officers. Instead of guarding the room, they moved toward the recorder. Mara stepped in front of it. One officer seized her injured hand, and pain drove her to one knee. The youngest girl screamed. Luca's restraint vanished from his eyes. But before his men could act, an alarm sounded upstairs. The hospital fire system announced smoke in the neonatal wing. Nurses began evacuating infants. Donors scattered. In the confusion, every basement light failed. Mara heard boots, a child gasp, and the recorder strike the floor. Emergency lamps returned 9 seconds later. Val, Hollow, and Chief Mercer remained in the corridor. The 6 girls remained with Mara. The recorder was gone. So was Amaya. Mercer claimed the oldest girl must have fled. Mara pointed to a fresh blood smear on the elevator threshold. She didn't run. Luca ordered his people to seal every private exit. But Mercer's officers blocked them under emergency protocol. Vale announced that infant lives took priority. It was a perfect diversion, because no one could oppose saving newborns without appearing monstrous. Mara looked at the ceiling and noticed the fire alarm flashed only in the donor wing. "Not the basement panel. There is no fire," she said. "Someone triggered a local evacuation." Luca believed her. But belief was not enough. With police controlling the building and cameras recording every move, the force would turn the rescued girls into hostages in the public story. Vale was already building. Luca made a choice that cost him power. He ordered his armed men to unload their weapons, place them on the floor, and submit to temporary police custody. The corridor went silent as pistols, magazines, and knives formed a dark line across the tile. "You wanted control, Chief," Luca said. "Now you have it in front of 40 cameras. If another child disappears from this building, everyone will know whose hands were free." Mercer could no longer quietly move the remaining 5 girls. He assigned uniformed officers to escort them to an independent children's clinic, selected by 3 donors. Mara was still arrested. As an officer led her away, Luca pressed the scorched handkerchief more firmly around her palm and whispered, count the bells. In the police van. Mara replayed Lily's message in her head. 4 short. 2 long. Saint Daria's public chapel rang 1 long bell every hour. The basement elevator chimed once. The sequence belonged somewhere else. She remembered the moment the lights failed. 4 rapid electronic beeps. Then 2 slower tones before the elevator opened. It was not a warning. It was an access code. At the precinct. Mercer placed Mara in an interview room with no camera light and offered a bargain. If she confessed that she had staged the basement scene, Saint Daria would decline charges, and the 5 rescued girls would enter protective care. If she refused, the hospital would release apartment footage, financial records, and witness statements proving she had planned the kidnapping. "You broke into my apartment," Mara said. "We have video of you leaving with the recorder. Then show me." Mercer slid a tablet across the table. The footage showed a woman in Mara's coat and headscarf, carrying a cleaning bag from her apartment at 6:12 that morning. The angle concealed her face, but she walked with a slight drag in the right foot. Mara had seen that walk every night for 6 months. Tillest Wynne, Saint Daria's evening nursing supervisor, wore blue orthopedic shoes after a surgical injury. The youngest girl's clue returned, the lady with blue shoes. Mara did not reveal the connection. "Where is Amaya?" she asked. Mercer leaned back. "Confess. And perhaps she will be found." That answer told Mara he knew the abduction was not an escape. She also noticed a pale crescent of powder on his right cuff. It smelled faintly of scorched oranges. The sterilization chemical had never reached the public corridor. Mercer had been near the tanks before entering the basement. She asked for a lawyer. He left her alone with the unsigned confession. 10 minutes later, the lights failed. 4 short beeps sounded from the electronic lock, followed by 2 long ones. The door opened. Luca stood outside without his jacket or weapons. "Your attorney posted bond," he said. "I don't have an attorney." "You do now." He had used the law, not a threat. And Mercer could not stop them without publicly ignoring a judge. Outside, dawn had turned the hospital's white towers grey. Reporters surrounded Saint Daria. Vale told them a disturbed employee had exploited missing child cases to attack a beloved institution. The hospital released the apartment video before Mara reached the sidewalk. Her name became a headline. By breakfast. Strangers had published her address and called Lily's disappearance a family lie. Luca offered to hide her at one of his estates. Mara refused. Hiding proves their story. Staying visible makes you a target. The girls were hidden for months. "I can survive being seen for 1 day." Luca studied her, then changed his plan. He took her to the Moretti Foundation's legal office, a glass building across from City Hall, where reporters could watch every entrance. Raphael had recovered copies of the basement photographs before police confiscated his phone. The images showed the 6 bracelets, purple numbers, supply pipes, wall scratches, and the silver crane padlock. Luca's accountants identified the crane as the logo of Greywing Sanitation. A contractor paid $9 million from Luca's Saint Daria grant. Greywing owned no trucks, employed no cleaners, and listed its headquarters at a demolished warehouse. "They stole your money," Mara said. "Money can be replaced." Luca enlarged a photograph of the blankets. Each had been stamped HBM in faded black letters. These came from Haven Bridge Ministries, a network of emergency foster shelters. 3 of the 6 girls disappeared while assigned there. The others vanished after Saint Daria mobile screenings. And Lily Haven Bridge operated the shelter where your mother stayed after losing your home. Mara felt the years collapse. She and Lily had slept there for 11 nights. A mobile clinic had examined every child on the 4th day. Lily disappeared a week later. Their mother died, believing she had failed to protect her youngest daughter. Luca showed Mara a foundation ledger. His grant had paid Greywing. Greywing paid Haven Bridge. And Haven Bridge purchased 6 medical transport placements from a company called Mercy Transit. The same 2 words appeared on the side of the burned recorder beneath soot. Not as a label, but as a melted fragment of packing tape. Someone had stored the recorder with Mercy Transit equipment before planting it. Luca's investigators could follow the money, but the records alone would prove fraud. Not where Amaya had been taken or what happened to Lily. Mara returned to the basement photographs. The wall behind the girls contained hundreds of scratched lines, but they were not random marks of passing days. Groups repeated in 4s and 2s. They were counting elevator codes. She said, every time someone arrived. The door beeped 4 times quickly and twice, slowly. Lily told me the same pattern. Raphael reported that Saint Daria had 3 elevators: public, surgical, and service. None used that signal. Mara remembered an old dumbwaiter in the laundry, sealed behind shelving and officially disconnected. Its control had beeped during weekly maintenance, but she had never seen it move. She enlarged another photograph. Dust on Amaya's bare heel contained red brick powder. Saint Daria's basement was poured concrete, somewhere beyond the steel room. The hidden route passed through older brick construction. The hospital had been built over St. Agatha's convent, abandoned after a fire 13 years earlier. The convent foundations extended beneath the laundry. Lily disappeared 1 year after the fire, when everyone believed the old tunnels had been sealed. Luca wanted to send investigators. Mara insisted on going, because she knew the laundry schedule, the service locks, and the places night workers could move without appearing on public cameras. He opposed it until she pointed to the hospital's press conference. Vale had announced that the charity wing would remain closed for urgent contamination removal. Greywing crews were already arriving. By noon, the tunnels would be emptied or destroyed. "You can protect me," she said, "but only I can tell which surfaces were cleaned before last night and which were cleaned after." Luca finally agreed, on the condition that they enter without guns. Police had declared Saint Daria an active investigation scene. If Moretti's soldiers were caught armed inside, Vale would bury the truth under a Mafia invasion narrative. Luca brought only Mara, Raphael, and attorney Naomi Price, who carried a court order allowing Mara to retrieve personal belongings under supervision. Vale assigned Celeste Wynne to escort them. Her blue orthopedic shoes squeaked against the polished floor. She greeted Mara with sorrowful eyes and said, "I cannot imagine what you are going through." Mara looked at her right foot. The slight drag matched the apartment footage. "Neither can I." Celeste led them to the staff locker room and warned them not to leave the marked route. Mara opened her locker. It had been searched. Someone had left 6 newspaper clippings about the missing girls beneath her spare uniform. The articles carried Mara's fingerprints because she had collected copies months earlier, while privately comparing their cases to Lily's. Vale had found the perfect material for a frame. Celeste watched her discover them. "You were obsessed," she said softly. "Anyone could misunderstand. Anyone who entered my locker. Management has access during emergencies." Mara packed her belongings and deliberately dropped a bottle of floor concentrate. Blue liquid spread beneath the lockers. Celeste stepped back. But her right sole left a clear print in the spill. Mara apologized and wiped it quickly, pressing the dirty cloth into her bag. At the laundry entrance, Celeste tried to end the visit. Naomi showed the order, which included all employee work areas. While they argued, Mara examined the sealed dumbwaiter. Fresh screws had replaced the rusted ones. A narrow crescent of red brick dust marked the floor. She pressed the call button. Nothing happened. 4 short. Too long. Lily had said. Mara tapped the button in that rhythm. The panel lit. Behind the shelf, old machinery groaned. The dumbwaiter rose from below, carrying a single object, Amaya's hospital bracelet, cut through and wet with blood. Celeste ran. Raphael caught her before she reached the stairwell. She began crying and claimed someone had forced her to steal Mara's recorder. Luca did not threaten her. He put Amaya's bracelet on the table and said, "A 16-year-old girl is bleeding somewhere below us. You have one chance to make your fear smaller than hers." Celeste's face crumpled. She admitted entering Mara's apartment with a key copied from hospital employment records. Hollow had ordered her to retrieve the recorder and plant the clippings. He knew Mara had applied for the housekeeping job after sending veiled letters about Lily. Celeste also admitted giving sedatives to girls brought through the laundry, but insisted she believed they were protected witnesses. Protected from whom, Mara asked. Celeste looked toward the ceiling. From the people who paid to own them. A shot cracked from the stairwell. The bullet struck Celeste beneath the shoulder and threw her against the machine. Raphael pulled her behind a steel cart as Luca dragged Mara down. Hollow fired again, then disappeared into the donor corridor before hospital police arrived. Celeste was alive, but the bullet had punctured her lung. The nearest trauma team worked for Vale. Mara pressed towels against the wound, while Naomi called an outside ambulance. Celeste gripped Mara's wrist and whispered, "The blue room." Lily hid the names in the blue room. Vale thinks the fire destroyed it. She lost consciousness before explaining more. Hospital officers tried to seize her as a suspect, but Naomi's court order and the shooting forced them to preserve her as a witness. The dumbwaiter shaft was too narrow for a person. Mara found grease only on the left rail, meaning the platform had been removed below and used as a signal lift, not transport. The old convent access had to be elsewhere. The cloth from Celeste's shoe gave Mara the next clue. Mixed into the blue floor cleaner was pale orange powder. The same sterilant dust marked Mercer's cuff. Yet, Celeste had never entered the basement room during the rescue. She had carried the powder from another location before escorting them. Mara followed the faint prints Celeste had left after stepping in the spill. They led through the laundry, past the linen press, and stopped at a tiled wall. Most tiles were cold, 6 were warm. Behind them, pipes carried heated air downward. Mara removed a loose inspection plate and found a lever. The wall opened into a brick stairwell. Red dust coated the steps. Luca called the independent clinic and ordered protection doubled around the 5 rescued girls. No one answered. A nurse finally picked up and said police had transferred the girls 15 minutes earlier under a court order signed by Chief Mercer. The destination field was blank. Mara looked at Amaya's bloody bracelet. The girls had not been rescued. They had only been moved into a cleaner cage. Luca's voice became deadly calm. "Raphael, find every vehicle that left the clinic. If you send men after police cars, Mercer will call it an ambush." Naomi warned. "Then we do it in daylight," Luca said. He called the 3 donors who had selected the clinic and told them their names were being used to justify an undocumented transfer. Within minutes, 2 local news helicopters began tracking the convoy, forcing Mercer to keep the vehicles on public roads. Meanwhile, Mara descended the brick stairs with Luca. They found a corridor beneath the modern hospital, scorched black from the convent fire. Child-sized handprints remained in ash along one wall. At the end stood a faded blue door. Inside, rusted cots surrounded a mural of clouds. This was not a medical room. It had been a dormitory. On the wall, hundreds of names had been written in pencil and covered with layers of washable paint. Time and heat had made the oldest writing rise through the newer coats. Mara found Lily Bennett near the window. Beside it, in her sister's careful handwriting, were 6 adult names and a sentence: "They choose us after donor night." Mara photographed every mark. Luca noticed holes drilled behind the baseboards. Inside, one cavity lay strips of microcassette tape wrapped in wax paper. Brittle but intact, Lily had dismantled the recorder and hidden copies of what she captured. The burned device planted upstairs was only the shell. A second cavity had been emptied recently. Dust around it carried the same tread as Celeste's shoe and a larger boot. Someone had returned before them and taken part of Lily's evidence. On the cot frame, Mara found a silver crane scratched upside down. When she turned her photograph, the crane became a map. The long neck was the corridor. The wings were 2 side rooms, and the legs indicated twin exits. Lily had drawn an escape route. Mara followed the left exit to a bricked arch. The right led to an underground loading bay. Tire tracks crossed fresh orange dust. A black Mercy transit van had departed minutes earlier. Raphael called. News helicopters had followed the official police convoy to a juvenile center, where reporters watched 5 empty vehicles arrive. The girls had never been inside. The transfer was a decoy. The real van had passed beneath the hospital while everyone watched the road. Luca's resources had been directed exactly where Vale wanted. He struck the brick wall once with his fist. Furious, not at Mara but at himself. I gave them the diversion. Then we stopped following their routes. Mara said. She knelt beside the tire tracks. One rear wheel leaked hydraulic fluid. The van would leave a thin, dark line until the leak emptied. The trail climbed a ramp to an alley behind Saint Daria. Raphael could track traffic cameras. But Mara knew where Mercy Transit washed hospital vehicles. Greywing's listed warehouse had been demolished. Yet, its water bills continued at an old municipal crematory near the river. She had noticed the address on chemical delivery receipts because cleaners joked that Greywing washed invisible trucks. Luca sent no soldiers. He contacted the city sanitation inspector, the state child protection commissioner, and every donor now fearing public association with the scandal. Naomi obtained an emergency warrant for the crematory, based on the hidden dormitory photographs. Celeste's statement, "And Amaya's blood." For the first time, the law moved faster than Vale's cover story. They reached the crematory 23 minutes later with state investigators, reporters behind a barrier, and Luca's unarmed security recording from public ground. The Mercy transit van stood inside, rear wheel dripping. Its cargo space was empty, except for 5 cut bracelets and a portable speaker playing the girls' recorded cries. Another decoy. On the concrete floor, Mara found 6 damp rectangles where cages had rested. A red scarf lay beneath one. It belonged to the youngest girl, Rosie. Vale wanted them to know they had missed the children again. State investigators discovered a furnace, burning paper records. but the flames had been lit too recently to destroy the steel impression plates used to stamp hospital bracelets. One plate bore Lily Bennett's name. Another bore Mara's. The network had used Lily's identity as a legal sponsor for 12 years, signing vulnerable girls into private recovery placements under the name of a woman who had vanished as a child. Mara's search for her sister had threatened more than a secret prison. It threatened hundreds of transfers carrying Lily's stolen signature. A television in the crematory switched on by itself. Vale appeared live from Saint Daria's chapel. Surrounded by patients and clergy, he announced that Luca Moretti had invaded a hospital, manipulated a grieving employee, and abducted 6 girls to extort control of the charity. Behind him, Chief Mercer displayed edited basement footage showing Luca's men with guns, but not the moment they laid them down. Vale called on federal authorities to arrest Luca. Luca's attorneys warned that warrants were already being prepared. If he fled, every accusation would harden. If he surrendered, Mara would lose the only force still protecting witnesses. He looked at her. You said hiding proves their story. So does running. Luca called the federal field office himself and offered to surrender publicly at Saint Daria in 1 hour. Provided independent agents secured the 5 rescued girls, and Amaya first, Vale accepted through the broadcast before authorities answered. It was another trap. But it created a deadline and forced the hospital to pretend the girls were alive. Mara studied the bracelet plates. Lily's plate was worn smooth at the edges, used hundreds of times. Mara's was new. Vale intended to replace Lily's identity with hers after tonight, turning Mara into the legal sponsor for every future disappearance while discrediting any investigation she raised. The girls were not merely witnesses. They were the first 6 transfers waiting for Mara Bennett's forged approval. He needs my signature, Mara said. Not on paper. On camera. The confession Mercer offered would authenticate my voice and handwriting. Once I admitted staging the basement. They could attach my identity to the placements. Naomi confirmed that a recorded confession could be manipulated into authorization samples. Mara had refused. So Vale still needed her alive. That was why the guards accused her instead of shooting her beneath the hospital. Luca's surrender would bring her back to Saint Daria, the only place where Vale controlled enough cameras to complete the frame. Mara also realized why Lily's message had surfaced now. Someone inside the network wanted Vale exposed, but lacked the power to act openly. Celeste had said Lily hid the names in the blue room. Knowledge Hollow would never have shared with a frightened nurse. Celeste had found one hidden tape herself, the copied key, the planted recorder, and the blue shoes all implicated her. But she had slipped the original Lily recording into the shell instead of destroying it. She had ensured Mara heard the message. Celeste was both participant and desperate whistleblower. Her actions endangered Mara. Yet without them, the 6 girls would have died unseen. Luca asked whether that earned mercy. Mara thought of Celeste pressing sedatives into children's arms. Then of her bleeding beside Amaya's bracelet. It earns a trial, where the girls can speak. She said, not forgiveness from us. Luca nodded. Merzer. She understood. Did not mean removing consequences. It meant refusing to become the same kind of person who decided whose life counted. The microcassette strips could not survive another trip in a pocket. So Naomi sealed them in evidence sleeves and handed them directly to the state investigator overseeing the crematory search. A forensic technician used a portable reader to recover 11 seconds before the first strip tore. Lily's young voice named Vale and Mercer. Then, another girl warned, that the 6 will be taken when the chapel sings twice. In the background, a ventilation fan pulsed at an uneven rhythm. Mara had cleaned every mechanical room at Saint Daria. The chapel's public ventilation ran continuously, but the old convent exhaust beneath it cycled twice whenever the rooftop helipad opened. Vale was not planning to drive the girls away. He was holding them under the chapel until a medical helicopter could remove them above the cameras surrounding every street. Luca's surrender was scheduled for the exact moment the hospital's foundation helicopter filed a pediatric emergency departure. The federal agents agreed. The clue justified a search. But Mercer had stationed city officers around the chapel and claimed the underground area was structurally unsafe. A warrant would take longer than the 41 minutes remaining. Mara proposed giving Vale what he needed. She would enter Saint Daria, pretend to accept the confession, and force him to take her to the girls before she completed it. Luca rejected the plan immediately. He has already tried to kill 6 children and place the crime on you, which means he cannot finish the transfer without me. You are treating his need as protection. No, I'm treating it as an opening. She placed the new bracelet plate, stamped with her name, on the table. If we wait outside, the helicopter leaves. If your men force the doors, Vale makes you the villain and moves the girls while everyone fights. He believes a maid is useful only when she is invisible. Let him keep believing it for 20 more minutes. Naomi outlined the risks with brutal precision. Mara could be searched, isolated, coerced, or killed after providing enough voice and signature material. A transmitter might fail, underground. No court would authorize a civilian operation. Mara answered that she was not asking permission to become bait. She was choosing to return to her workplace and correct a lie carrying her name. Luca stood apart from the others for a moment. When he returned, he handed her no weapon. He gave her the white handkerchief, freshly cleaned but still marked by her blood, and asked her to promise one thing. If the choice becomes evidence or the girls, leave the evidence. You would lose the proof clearing you. My name has survived worse. They may not survive 10 minutes. It was the cost Mara needed to hear. She agreed. Raphael fitted no tracker beneath the bandage because Vale would search it. Instead, Mara soaked the soles of her work shoes in the colorless concentrate she had used to reveal Celeste's prints. Under ultraviolet light, every step would glow blue for half an hour. Naomi placed one listening wafer inside the metal button of Mara's uniform, but they expected the old brick walls to block its signal. Luca arranged for federal agents to carry ultraviolet lamps and told his men to remain 6 blocks away. Then he transferred control of the Moretti Foundation's complete financial records to an independent trustee and signed consent for federal auditors to examine every payment connected to Saint Daria. The decision exposed legitimate businesses, private allies, and years of guarded transactions. Raphael warned that rivals would exploit it. Luca signed anyway. If I ask the public to believe Vale hid crimes behind charity, he said, I cannot hide my own books while asking, at Saint Daria. Thousands watched Luca step from his car with empty hands. Federal agents met him on the hospital stairs. He surrendered his phone, submitted to cuffs, and allowed Mercer to walk him through a wall of cameras. Vale waited inside the chapel, wearing a white physician's coat. He had replaced the donor smile with injured dignity. Mara entered separately through the employee door. Hollow searched her, removed the button transmitter within seconds, and crushed it beneath his heel. He found no weapon and no tracker. Still cleaning up other people's messes, he asked, Tonight I'm starting with yours. He struck her across the mouth, then took her to the chapel archive. where Vale had prepared a camera, a confession, and 6 blank guardianship forms. The confession stated that Mara had kidnapped the girls after years of delusion over Lily, planted evidence in Saint Daria, and manipulated Luca into financing the scheme. Vale told her to read it aloud, sign every page, and answer biometric verification questions. Mara looked around. A ventilation grate near the ceiling pulsed twice, paused, then pulsed twice again. The helipad doors were cycling. I want to see the girls. They are safe. Then you don't need my signature. Vale placed a photograph on the table. It showed Amaya bound to a chair, blood drying at her temple. With Rosie and the other 4 girls behind her, a digital clock in the frame read 18 minutes. Complete the statement. And they enter protected homes. The kind that paid to own them. Vale's expression changed just enough to confirm Celeste's description. He claimed Saint Daria had rescued unwanted children from shelters that could not feed them. Wealthy patrons funded their education and expected privacy in return. Some girls resisted, ran, or threatened benefactors. Those children became liabilities. The hospital could not allow to destroy the entire charity system. You sold them, Mara said. I placed them where resources existed. You erased their names. Names are a luxury for people with families willing to search. Mara held his gaze. Lily had a family. Your mother had no money, no home, and no influence. To the city, that meant no family at all. The words hurt. But Mara did not give him the reaction he wanted. She lifted the pen. Show them to me alive, or I write nothing. Vale called Hollow. They marched her through the chapel sacristy to a locked supply closet. Hollow entered 4 short digits and 2 longer ones by holding the final buttons down. The floor descended like a freight lift. Mara's treated shoes left a glowing trail, invisible to both men. Beneath the chapel, the old convent corridor had been reinforced with demolition charges disguised as structural sensors. Wires ran toward the charity wing. Vale had planned the dawn demolition long before the girls were found. The shelter under the chapel was not the same steel room. It was a former furnace chamber with 1 barred exit and a circular shaft rising toward the helipad. The 6 girls were there. Amaya was conscious, her injury shallow but painful. Rosie saw Mara and began to rise. Mara shook her head slightly, warning her to wait. Vale pointed to a camera fixed above a desk. Read the confession here. They can watch you save them. Marasat. She read the first 2 sentences slowly, changing small words so the recording would not match the printed text. At the 3rd sentence, she replaced kidnapped with found. Vale stopped her. Exactly as written. My mouth is bleeding. Give me water. Hollow left to fetch it, because Vale wanted a clean recording. Mara used the pause to count. 6 girls, 1 director, 1 camera, 1 descending lift, demolition wires, and a ventilation shaft too narrow for Luca, but wide enough for Rosie. Amaya's chair was secured with a plastic hospital restraint, not rope. Mara had cut thousands of those from linen bundles. A sharp metal tab inside her name badge could slice one. Vale watched her eyes. Do not make another heroic mistake. My first one worked. Temporarily. By tomorrow you will be remembered as a criminal. Moretti will be remembered as your violent accomplice. And the girls will have 6 new names. What will Lily be remembered as Vale's confidence thinned? Nothing. That was the point. He admitted Lily had stolen a recorder during a donor selection 12 years earlier. She captured names, transfer prices, and Mercer's promise to remove missing person reports. When she hid the tapes and refused to reveal them, Hollow's predecessor locked her in the blue room. Lily escaped into the convent tunnels and opened a fire door, allowing 4 other girls to reach the street. Vale triggered the fire suppression system to stop her, unaware that heat had damaged its pumps. Smoke filled the sealed corridor. Lily never emerged. Vale had used her identity afterward because a dead girl who remained officially missing could sign forever. His explanation was not a triumphant confession. It was a series of impatient corrections, each drawn out by Mara's questions while the clock fell from 14 minutes to 11. The camera recording Mara also captured him. Vale noticed the red light and smiled. This feed belongs to me, not after the police sees it. The police belong to me too. Above them, Luca sat cuffed in the chapel's front pew, while Mercer told federal agents the underground access had collapsed years earlier. Luca saw a faint blue mark on the white marble beside the sacristy. Another print appeared beyond the curtain. He said nothing to Mercer. He shifted his cuffed hands and knocked a brass candle stand to the floor. Federal agent Dana Cho moved to retrieve it and saw the glowing footprint under her ultraviolet evidence lamp. Luca quietly told her Mara had marked a route. Cho did not release him. She requested a structural safety team, and then walked the trail with 2 agents under the legal authority already granted for Mara's suspected kidnapping route. Mercer blocked the sacristy. Cho showed him the furnace plates recovered at the crematory, including his own name among Lily's partial recording. She ordered him aside. He drew his weapon. Every camera in the chapel captured the police chief, aiming at a federal agent. Luca remained seated, refusing to give Mercer the chaos he needed. Other officers disarmed their chief. Cho found the supply closet lift and entered the 4 short, 2 long sequence supplied in Lily's message. The platform would not descend. Hollow had locked it below. In the furnace chamber, Hollow returned with water and a pistol. He reported Mercer's arrest. Vale abandoned the confession. He ordered Hollow to move the girls into the helipad shaft immediately. The helicopter was 3 minutes away. Hollow unlocked Amaya and grabbed Rosie. Mara drove the metal pen through the back of his hand. He fired into the ceiling. Dust and concrete showered the room as Mara pulled Rosie away. Amaya slammed the chair into Hollow's knee. The other girls scattered behind the furnace. Vale reached for a black switch beside the demolition wires. Mara recognized the maintenance cover and kicked his wrist before he could lift it. The switch fell but remained attached by its cord. Hollow struck Amaya and raised the pistol. Mara had no weapon, but she had the stainless steel water pitcher he had brought. She threw it into the old electrical panel. Water crossed the exposed contacts. The lights exploded. The freight lock released, and the chamber dropped into darkness. Hollow fired at movement and hit a steam pipe. Scalding vapor filled the center of the room, separating him from the girls. Mara crawled toward the sound of their breathing and found Amaya. Together, they cut the restraints from the others with the metal badge tab. Above, the released lift began descending with Agent Cho and 2 rescue officers. Vale found the demolition switch in the dark. Red emergency lamps came on as his thumb closed over it. He told Mara the charges could erase the tunnels, the tapes, and everybody before federal agents reached the bottom. Luca's voice came from the lift shaft, carried down as he shouted for Vale to consider the cameras still recording in the chapel. Vale answered that the world would blame Moretti explosives. Luca had anticipated that claim when he opened his financial records. Federal auditors had already identified the charges as Grey Wing purchases delivered under Vale's authorization 6 weeks earlier. For the first time, Vale understood that his prepared story had lost its ending. He pressed the switch anyway. Nothing happened. Mara had seen the demolition wires when she entered. While pretending to stumble near Rosie, she had pulled the yellow safety bridge, connecting the trigger to the charges. It was a cleaner's habit to notice what could kill someone after everyone else left the room. Vale pressed again. Mara held up the small yellow bridge. Were you looking for this hollow charged through the steam? Before he reached her, Amaya kicked the wounded knee she had struck earlier. He fell, and Agent Cho's team emerged from the lift with weapons trained. Hollow tried to turn his gun toward Rosie. Luca, still cuffed and standing behind the agents, stepped into the line of fire. Hollow hesitated at the larger target. That second allowed Cho to shoot him in the shoulder and disarm him. Luca took the risk without knowing the agent would fire in time. Mara saw the cost in his face only after the girls were behind armor. Vale attempted to retreat into the helipad shaft. But the helicopter pilot had heard the gunshot over the open ground channel and aborted landing. Vale climbed 3 rungs before Mara called his name. Lily was 13. Not nothing. He looked down. Your sister is dead. And she still stopped you. Vale glanced at the disabled trigger. The rescued girls. And the agents collecting the camera that held his own words. His foot slipped on the shaft ladder. Mara caught his wrist. For one dangerous moment, the man who had erased Lily hung over the furnace chamber with his life in Mara's injured hand. Vale stared at her as if mercy proved she was weak. Pull me up, he demanded. Mara did, with Agent Cho's help. And the moment his feet touched the floor, Cho placed him in handcuffs. You don't get to fall away from what you did, Mara said. You get to hear every name. The rescue did not end with applause. Rosie collapsed from dehydration before reaching the chapel. Amaya refused treatment until she saw the other 5 placed in separate ambulances staffed by state physicians. Luca remained under federal arrest, while agents verified the financial evidence and the edited basement footage. Reporters watched the 6 girls emerge alive, destroying Vale's claim that Mara had abducted them. Naomi obtained the unedited camera files from the furnace chamber before Saint Daria's private server could erase them. Vale's own voice described the placement system. Lily's stolen identity. The blue room. And Mercer's role. The hidden tapes supplied names and dates. The bracelet plates connected those names to transfers. Grey Wing payments financed the vehicles. Chemicals. And demolition charges. Celeste's testimony explained how children moved from screenings to shelters and into the tunnels. No single clue solved the case. Together, they formed a chain. The network could not cut. By midnight, federal agents had arrested Mercer, Hollow, Val, 2 Haven Bridge administrators, and 7 patrons who had paid for illegal placements. More arrests followed as surviving girls and young women recognized the names Lily had written beneath the blue paint. Luca was released after 20 hours. But the audit he had invited did not disappear when his innocence in the kidnapping became clear. He paid fines for unrelated foundation, reporting failures, and lost 3 businesses when partners fled the scrutiny. He did not complain. The Moretti grant that Vale had stolen was frozen, then transferred by court order into a survivor-controlled trust. Luca surrendered his claim to the money. Mara insisted the trust could not carry his name. Saint Daria's name. Or hers. The survivors named it the Open Door Fund. Saint Daria remained open under emergency public management, because closing it would punish sick children for Vale's crimes. The charity board was removed. Every underground room was photographed, measured, and searched before demolition. Behind the bricked left arch in the blue room, investigators found the remains of 3 girls, including Lily. Her identity was confirmed through dental records, and a small brass button from the coat Mara remembered sharing with her on cold nights. The discovery ended 12 years of uncertainty but began a grief. Mara could no longer postpone with searching. She sat on the convent steps until dawn, with Lily's restored recording beside her. Luca found her there and did not tell her to be strong. He sat one step lower, leaving the space beside her empty for the sister who should have grown up. Mara played the recovered message once. After the warning about the bells, a technician had restored 4 final words buried beneath the static, "Tell Mom I tried." Mara wept for her mother, who had died blaming herself, and for the 13-year-old girl who had freed 4 others while believing no one would remember. Luca waited until Mara turned off the recorder. She did more than try. He said, "So did you?" Months later, Vale was convicted of kidnapping, conspiracy, attempted murder, through evidence, destruction, and trafficking-related offenses. Mercer received a separate sentence for falsifying warrants, obstructing investigations, and enabling illegal transfers. Hollow survived his wound and accepted no mercy bargain. Amaya's testimony placed him at 3 abductions, and the apartment footage tied his orders to Mara's frame. Celeste recovered and pleaded guilty to unlawful confinement, evidence tampering, and administering drugs without consent. Her cooperation reduced her sentence, but did not erase it. At Mara's request. The court required every future request for leniency to include written acknowledgement from the survivors, not as permission, but as a record of whom Celeste had harmed. Rosie chose not to write. Amaya wrote 1 sentence. "Helping us once did not make the earlier nights disappear." Celeste accepted it. That was the beginning of accountability, not redemption. The 6 girls did not become symbols in matching dresses or props at a charity reopening. Their identities and medical records were protected. Some returned to relatives after careful review. 2 entered homes, chosen through independent advocates. Amaya, nearly 17, requested supervised housing and finished school on her own terms. Rosie kept the red scarf recovered from the crematory, even after learning Vale had planted it as a decoy. She said an object used to frighten, people could still be taken back. Mara understood. She kept Luca's white handkerchief, washed clean, except for one pale rust-colored stain. She never returned to cleaning Saint Daria's floors. Instead, the state appointed her to a paid oversight council with veto power over emergency child transfers. She demanded fingerprinted custody chains, independent transport logs, direct access for siblings, and a rule that no missing child report could be closed by the institution that last held the child. She also required night workers, cleaners, cooks, and drivers to have protected reporting channels because they saw the doors powerful people forgot to hide. Luca funded security for witnesses but accepted no seat on the council. When he offered advice, Mara listened. When he offered control, she refused. Their bond grew slowly, not from rescue, but from the night each had chosen a cost. He had placed his power under examination to keep the truth credible. She had walked back into the building that stole her sister because 6 girls still needed names. 1 year after the gala, Saint Daria opened the old chapel to the families of the missing. The blue wall was preserved behind glass with every recovered name visible. At the center, Lily Bennett's writing remained faint, but legible. They choose us after donor night. Beneath it, the survivors added a new sentence in 6 different colors. We choose ourselves now. Mara stood with Amaya and Rosie, while the chapel bell rang 4 short times and 2 long ones. The sequence no longer opened a hidden door. It opened the memorial. Luca remained at the back without cameras or guards around him. Mara crossed the chapel and took his hand. Not because she owed him gratitude, but because he had learned that protection without truth was another cage. Outside, former donors faced reporters. Trustees answered public questions. And the Open Door Fund published every dollar it spent. Inside, Mara listened as Lily's restored voice filled the room one final time. 12 years earlier, a frightened girl had believed charity girls left no families behind. She had been wrong about only one thing. A family was not measured by money, influence, or the willingness of an institution to record it. A family could be one sister who kept searching, 6 girls who refused new names, witnesses who accepted consequences, and even a feared man who chose justice when violence would have been easier. The hospital had tried to erase them beneath steel. Smoke, false records, and a countdown. Instead, the maid they never noticed opened the door, carried their names into daylight, and made the people above finally hear the bells.